companies last 20 years. Like most of the companies we work for, or have worked for, haven't lasted 20 years. That's very true. Thankfully, all of us have lasted that long.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah, it's cool to be back for the 8th time in a row. I think that's pretty sweet. I was thinking of giving it up with the kids because they're a lot of work, but then I realized I gotta keep the streak going. You guys are keeping the streak going. So sure. Well, so before I get started, I want to do a quick survey. How many people here would consider themselves to be junior? All right, this talk is basically just for you. How about senior? Senior, okay, and staff or above. Great, you can give me lots of notes for giving this talk at Rocky Mountain Ruby this year. Senior role is a real crossroads for a lot of people. At a lot of companies, your ladder kind of looks like this. It's kind of the farthest you can go as an individual contributor. You basically have one option for promotion. It's to go to management. But it doesn't have to be this way. Your journey as an individual contributor, as many of you know, doesn't have to stop at being senior. Because there is sometimes another option, which is to continue on the IC path and go to staff or above. So I think it was about a year ago, a little bit more than that. Jesse from Stripe gave a talk here about being a senior engineer, and I was like, oh, it'd be pretty easy to just do that, but just replace the word senior with the word staff and make it sound scarier. And I figured that would be a good talk to give, especially in a year where I didn't do a lot of working because I had kids. So a couple months ago at Rocky Mountain Ruby, the night before the conference, Becky and I think Spike, you were in this conversation too, we were chatting about our jobs as staff engineers. And we were like, wow, we don't have the same job. In fact, there's almost no overlap between what we do, which is shocking because we all have the same title. And to be honest with you, even at GitHub, the conversation is very similar with other staff engineers. It's like, wow, I do none of what you do. So I'm often asked, how do you get promoted to staff? What is your version of staff? And how the heck do you survive doing that, let alone thrive in a sustainable way? So today I'm going to try and answer those questions based on my experience and conversations I've had. I talked to a bunch of staff engineers internally for this talk. And my selfish goal, specifically for this audience, is to tell me everything you disagree with, because I'm going to give this talk at other conferences, and you all are actually more staff and more experience than I am. So my name is Joel. I live over in Louisville with my wife and our 2.5 and 5 year and 5-month-old boys. And I currently work at GitHub as a staff engineer, and I focus on the health of our Ruby on Rails monolith, which basically just means I get to work on Ruby and Rails upstream all day, which is awesome. So of course, what I'm sharing here is not GitHub's opinion, especially not the GitHub that sponsored this meetup. That's a different GitHub. It's not official opinion of the company or any of my previous employers who I will mention and identify in this talk. So first, how did I get promoted? Well, I started by being a photographer, and that was really fun, and I did a lot of cool stuff, but that layoffs were not great in the news industry. So I moved to a company called Mojitech, that many of you are familiar with. That was the 10th host of the 10th location of the Boulder Ruby meetup. Mojitech is a software consultancy, and I don't know if they do it anymore, but they used to run apprenticeships. Really cool, where this was before code schools were really a thing. You could come in and they would pay you to learn, off the street, which I don't know how that made financial sense, but I worked there I was there for about 6 months as a junior, and I was promoted to mid. And then a year after that, I was promoted to lead, which was at the time the highest title. I believe it still is. They kind of considered that fairly terminal, and it got fuzzy beyond that. After that, I went to a company called Wonder. They're still here in Boulder. That was with a startup with a total of 3 engineers, including the CTO. I was senior. I don't know what that meant because there was only one level besides the CTO. But I'm glad they called us senior. It felt good. Was there for a little while, and then went to Galvanize, where my title was also senior. And a couple months later, I was promoted to lead engineer. There were maybe 24 engineers at the company at the time, and I reported the VP of engineering, and confusingly, I had 1 report. So I was kind of a tech lead manager. It was a very weird hybrid role. It was the best or worst of both worlds. Then I joined GitHub as a mid or a level 3 ostensibly going down 2 levels, but for quite a bit more money, which maybe says something about how those levels really aligned across companies. GitHub had maybe 300 engineers at the time, and we had this kind of 8-level system, which was junior, or we call it intern a lot of the time, mid, 1, 2, and 3, senior, staff, principal, and distinguished. And we have like 1,200 engineers now today, and we have the exact same leveling system, or effectively exact same. So my path to getting a staff promotion was a couple months into the job. I had the idea for Vue component, and I pitched it to my manager, and he gave me a little bit of time. He said, go for it. And after a few months, I had a working prototype. In fact, it was speaking here that motivated me. I did some conference-driven development to get it out the door. And that was my first talk here at Boulder Ruby, and then at RailsConf the following spring. And basically, right around a year and a half after I was joined, I was promoted to senior because of that project. And shortly after that, I went to an offsite, and I ran into the person who ran our design systems organization, and we talked about how Vue component would be cool for that. And a few months later, I asked to join her team, and I got to work on that project as my full-time job, which is pretty cool. So as COVID rolled around, there was a request that came out when everyone was cooped up for the summer for cool tech debt projects. I was like, oh, I should propose Vue component. And I basically put out all these pitches, and people just got to pick which one they wanted to work on. And I got 12 people to work with me full time for 6 months, just out of the blue.
Wow.
I'm like, that's like bigger than a lot of those companies I worked for. I'm like, I guess I'm CTO now. So I had a proposal to basically have people build Vue components for our design system and then adopt them broadly across the company. I've given talks on this since then. And the following spring, I was basically promoted for that project. That was my staff project. I don't know, for those of you who got promoted, whether you had a specific project that was like your crown jewel, this was fine. So I've now been at staff for about 5 years, and I do not plan on changing that. So what is my job? What does it mean to me to be a staff engineer? Well, for me, at least the way I see it is that at a lot of companies, the senior level is considered terminal, and that like it's totally okay to never go beyond senior, even when the staff level is available. It's okay to just say, okay, I'm not gonna go to management, I'm just gonna stick here. I can retire as senior. We have people retire as senior at GitHub. I've yet to really hear of someone being pressured to go up for promotion, which means that it's something you choose to pursue, or maybe your manager helps you choose to pursue. And it can take a really long time. Some people at our company spend a decade at senior before they go for staff. And this can be really disorienting because people are used to that kind of quick promotion cadence that I think a lot of us have seen earlier in our careers, or we see our peers going through. So in general, staff engineers work at a broader scope than senior engineers in breadth or depth. So when it comes to breadth, a senior engineer might work typically on the team level, but a staff engineer is expected to work beyond the team level, multiple teams, maybe even multiple organizations or disciplines. They might report to a director instead of a team level manager, working across all the directors' teams, like maybe mentoring engineers on a couple teams. That's mostly what I've done. I actually checked on Monday because I was reorged again, and I've reported to 6 directors in 5 years, and that is typical. I was actually ironically on Monday reorged to report to a manager for the first time as a staff engineer, which is fine. So that's breadth, but you might also just go deep on something. So like one analogy we like to use at GitHub, which I actually learned is from Bradford, who handles some of this leveling stuff, is the rope metaphor. So junior engineer, your job is to learn. You're learning about rope or code. And then the mark of going from junior to mid is that you become independent. You can work with rope on your own. You can write code on your own without someone looking over your shoulder. And then when you're a senior, you're starting to know more about like the way you would prioritize and plan your work with rope. And you might be able to like, say, take a project and split it into work for a mid to work on or for a junior to work on. As a staff, you start to be as concerned maybe with like the process or the inner workings of the technology you're working in instead of just, executing on. So you can see why maybe at some companies you don't need all these levels, right? You might not need someone who understands rope making at a small startup. You might not need someone who knows more about rope than you ever will, or certainly is inventing nylon, unless you're at a rope inventing startup. So for example, at GitHub, like the principal engineers, they might know more about databases than you will. The distinguished engineers are inventing databases. Like the example, quintessential example I think I can talk about is that our code search is a novel technology invented by a distinguished engineer. It's not like an off-the-shelf thing. And that's an example of like, that's a critical technology at GitHub, and it is novel and being invented. So that's someone with like a computer science PhD who got like other PhDs to work on it, like that level stuff. Same thing with like, I think like our code QL stuff, I think falls into a similar bucket, like our really intelligent code scheme.
I worked at IBM many, many years ago. There were very few distinguished engineers at IBM, and that is PhD stuff. And the person who works here in Boulder, she invented JPEG.
There you go.
So that was the distinct, and also the image format that is used by fax machines. So yeah, that goes.
Was it a tip?
Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah, that's
very cool.
That's a great
Really
example.
great stories.
So you can imagine that like we have like 3 distinguished engineers in the company. We might have 30 or 40 principals, 200 staff, and then we have about 800 or 900 people that make up the rest of the levels, to give you a rough idea of distribution. Or you might go long. You can come up with a good slide, please. You might work on problems that take months or years to solve, such as like major product launches or migrations. Like I'm working on a massive migration right now by myself. It's just like cool, go on a year-long journey, just carry the torch. But I think maybe the best definition of the role that is perhaps more commonplace is from Will Larson's book. Has anyone here who here has read Staff Engineer, or has at least heard of the gist of it? Great. Okay, I do have something for you, staff folks. Yes. So I'm going to read some quotes from the book, but Will basically breaks the staff engineer role, he believes, into like 4 kind of key distinct jobs. The first one is tech lead. A tech lead, he says, is someone who guides the approach and execution of a particular team. So it's a team-focused staff plus engineer. They partner closely with a single manager, but sometimes they partner with 2 or 3 managers within a focused area. Some companies also have a tech lead manager role, worst of both worlds, which is similar to the tech lead archetype, but exists on the EM ladder and includes people management responsibilities.
Yeah, sensor engineering manager.
Engineering manager,
Yeah. Just want to make that.
So I've done this job actually quite a bit at GitHub, and each time it's been for paternity leave. So when a manager goes on leave, I've stepped in covering for the absence of one of my directors' reports. And that means doing one-on-ones, in a couple cases actually hiring like new engineers for that team, and doing performance-related things like performance reviews and whatnot. And that is often a dotted line thing, which gets weird. Next one is architect. So an architect is responsible for the direction, quality, and approach in a certain area. They combine in-depth knowledge with technical constraints, user needs, and organization level leadership. And this is really what my view component work has been. It's when when I organize the effort with that team to like migrate everything for the summer. That was kind of architect, tech lead, kind of hybrid, because it wasn't actually a team. There wasn't actual reporting going on. A solver digs into kind of arbitrary problems and finds an appropriate path forward. And some focus is given, like you'll often focus on a given area for like a longer period of time because of the difficulty. Other times it can just mean that you're like a firefighter, where like if you especially report to a director, your director might be like, oh, shit's hitting the fan here, just go put the fire out. And then like once the fire's out, you move on because like you've delegated that work back to the team. So one example of that, when I started the view component work, was Aaron Patterson and I paired
Name drop.
every once in a while for a couple months to do the initial work. So actually, really, he was being the solver. I wasn't. I was along for the ride with him.
Solver.
Yeah.
Chief.
Yeah.
Assistant to the solver.
So we were working on like literally a Rails. This is a Rails patch that was landed that made the view component work possible. We also worked on the framework itself too. And then the last one is right hand. A right hand basically extends an executive. They're kind of a form of an executive's assistant, borrowing the executive's like scope and authority to operate on really complex things. So they provide basically additional leadership bandwidth to leaders of large scale organizations, and that's what the book says. I just say to provide at any scale. And I fall into this one a lot as well. So like an example of this is like my director would be like, I have this idea. Can you actually go write the proposal and like do the research and talk to people about like flesh out why we should do this project? Like I just had this idea. And that also might look like, oh, a director coming to you and saying, what should the entire organization's quarterly plan be or yearly plan be? Can you write the first draft because you've been pairing with engineers and you know what they care about? This could also mean proposing new roles. Like say you're working with a team and you realize this team is really understaffed in a certain way, you might go to your director and say, hey, I think we should hire for this role, and they'll have you do the whole HR process of like, okay, requesting it, new headcount. Or it could mean working with like hiring contractors kind of in a similar boat, or working with third-party vendors. So like, for example, my director one time was like, we need to do A/B testing, figure out what we're going to do. So I looked at like internal and external solutions and ended up going through the whole procurement process with Optimizely. And I was like the technical contact for GitHub to do Optimizely. This is why, by the way, I see us as engineers getting so much marketing content, because we often end up being put in that role of purchasing, effectively, like driving the purchasing decision. And I know that I've seen people in my role also kill deals. So I can see why like they really care about like the staff archetype. So you get some more scope, you work in some combination of those archetypes. I think it's pretty fun. So how do I keep it fun? This is the part I really want to hear from all of you. So some ways I thrive. One is really focusing on those archetypes when it comes to my relationship with my manager. I really think that this is kind of useful at all levels, that you should be talking to your manager within the context of making sure that you are actually doing the right thing on a given project. And I think those archetypes can actually be kind of true outside of the staff path. Like, do you want me as a mid to be like doing technical exploration, or should I just be like executing a certain thing? And I think it's especially important though at the staff level, because our jobs are also different from even other staff engineers, that it's really easy to feel like you're doing the wrong thing. And it's also easy to do the wrong thing. So that comes from, there's some truth in that. I think that it's really something I've struggled with, is that like we have so many amazing staff plus engineers at our company. It's really easy to see what other people are doing and feel like because I'm not doing what they're doing, that I'm doing a bad job. When, at least in my mental model, the company can rarely afford to pay two people at the staff level to do the same thing. They actually want you to do your thing. And it can be really disconcerting coming from a world where, like, as a senior engineer, it's much easier maybe for your manager to say, go do what that other senior engineer does. Like, just roll off them. So continuously checking in with my manager really helps me kind of overcome that fear. I feel like I have to overcome that about every month. It also speaks to maybe a conundrum, though, that I've seen a lot of seniors that are struggling with the promotion to staff facing, which is that there has to be a business need for a staff job. Like if you're on a team with other staff engineers, it's generally, I've observed, really hard to get promoted, because that often means that the roles have already been filled or the space has been filled on the team. When I was promoted, no one even reporting to my director was staff. So I would say that I had like the opposite, where it was like, I would admit, a lot easier for me to get. And if there's anything I've seen for people going through this process that's been a real struggle for them, is how unfair it feels, because it's a very unfair process. Like, I think that like, at least in our business, the opportunities to do this kind of work are very unevenly distributed. Like, your team might have room for 4 staff engineers, but you might have a team that has 8 senior engineers and there's no staff level like business need whatsoever. And they might think that because there's no staff engineers on the team, that like they're due or even owed a promotion. That just isn't going to come. So like I pointed out, I shared like the title progression from other companies to also point out that like plenty of companies just don't do this. Like, and for some people, if they want this work, it's a reason for them to leave the company. Or to, at GitHub, people regularly move teams around. I've even done that as a staff engineer, because we ran out of staff level work in the last department I was in. I just said, cool, I'm bouncing over here. This is, of course, something that your manager should be helping you with, whether they are they should be saying, okay, if you want to be on staff, this could or couldn't happen, like on your team, maybe you should go somewhere else. Another thing that I've been doing for a while that I have really liked is keeping a work journal. Have you guys heard of Julia Evans' brag doc? So I keep a daily brag doc, which is, I didn't do it originally because I was a parent, but now that I'm a parent and I have no functional memory anymore. I went to do my self-review this year and I was like, I looked at my journal from like 6 months ago and I was like, wait, if you had out, I would had no recollection. Yeah. So it was really helpful. And basically what it is, it's just a daily post that is like little tidbits that I think should go on my performance review potentially. And maybe a record of like cool things on it or something like that.
So you do it publicly.
It's internal.
Yeah,
So it's like,
yeah.
it's internal. And this is, yeah. What did you say?
I said Pache. Pache's watching, listening, reading. That's Pache's link there.
I think that like what I've also found is useful for this is that this is a way to create a record of doing something that is maybe less visible, like pairing with someone, for example. Like on this one, I showed like I paired with this other staff engineer on something and like talking about working on that project together. Maybe he has all the artifacts, like maybe he's the one writing the PRs and whatnot. This allows me to at least have a record that I did something that like we still try to emphasize the impact of at work. Like it's just a little bit harder to, if you don't have a URL for your pairing, right, to be able to point to later. I'll also just say that like doing this, while it is like a little obsessive, it's really made me think about doing things that are worth writing down. Because if I can't think of like a good story to tell about it, like maybe it's not impactful enough. And maybe I need to talk to my manager about whether they think I should be doing it. Because if we can't figure out a good story to tell about something that I'm doing, it's probably just shouldn't, probably not a good use of time.
When do you do this?
I do it at the end of every day. But I take these notes throughout the day. So like I have an Apple Note open at this point, and when I do something, I just drop it there. And it's part of my closing the laptop ritual. The last thing I do is I click submit on this, and then I shut my computer down. I'd also say that like part of one of the reasons I started doing this is that I got some constructive criticism on a performance review that as a department level staff engineer, my work wasn't visible enough. Like people didn't understand what I did. So when I would like come join their project for something, they'd be like, who's this guy parachuting in? Like, is this all he's working on? Like, who even is he? And this is a way to like kind of allow people to be like, okay, this is what's going on. And I'll often tag people that I worked with that day on the thing so that they can actually see like the record. And it also helps people like connect the dots and be like, oh, there's the link to that PR issue or whatever. Another thing that I think is really important is finding ways to predict the future. I think a big part of having an impact at the breadth and depth we at least expect out of staff engineers is that you really need to understand like internal trends, like what are the technical and non-technical things going on at the company? What about, maybe even external trends, like how is the area you work on progressing in terms of potential new technologies, or maybe cool things your competition is doing technically in your area, and basically finding ways to surface those into your work. And I've actually found that social media is terrible for this, because I find that social media is maybe a little bit too, it's just like too much to consume, and in a lot of forums it's like it's not almost not important enough. It's like small things that are like trivial. And what I found is that there are a couple newsletters that do a good job of kind of filtering out what is more important. So I like Ruby Weekly. The Hacker newsletter is fantastic. They summarize Hacker News every week. So on Fridays I get that and I read Hacker News for an hour, and then I'm not on Hacker News. And then I'll often get assigned into like a specific space. So like I did accessibility work for a couple of years, and the legal landscape kept changing. So I subscribed to WebAIM, which is the one here. And then also actually like a legal firm's newsletter that was like, here's what we're seeing in my public caseload this month. And it was really helpful. That work was also run by our legal department. So one of the things that I did when I was working on this talk is I talked to other staff engineers and actually asked them, what were they being recognized for in their performance reviews? And one of them was being a knowledge source. So like along those lines, like, you know, this is something we've been interviewed for. So like one of our criteria when we're interviewing engineers is, did the person we're interviewing teach us something? And that is a big clue that that person might be at the staff level or above. So like I can tell you there was one candidate we were interviewing was a senior role. We hadn't even considered hiring a staff engineer. They came in and taught every single person that interviewed them technically something new. And we're like, we literally had a rubric system that almost forced us to offer them a staff job. And we did. And they were very successful. And that was like a key marker of our hiring process of them. So they went and taught people things about like Ruby on Rails. They taught me some things about Ruby on Rails. Really cool. Another one is speaking truth to power. I think that like, this is something I hear a lot. I think that, I think about Brooke actually when I think about this a lot. I don't know if you guys know. I wish Brooke was here. I feel a little bad talking about him behind his back. Okay. There are some engineers that they don't feel like leadership cares about the right things. And I think that this is a common thing that even when you're at the staff level, you just feel like, oh man, this code is not good. There's a ton of tech debt, or like the software craftsmanship isn't right. But you get that weird feeling that like you care more than anyone else does. Well, I think as a staff engineer, to a certain extent, it's the expectation that you will represent that concern to non-technical people if you think that it is valuable to the business. Like that is your job, is to surface those kinds of things. And those might come from maybe the people that you're mentoring, for example. And the way I see that is that like at a lot of companies, the product discipline runs the show. They say we're shipping this for this reason on this date. This is a very important check and balance to say, okay, we're not going to do that, or we're going to cut scope here so that we can make this investment in the system instead. How to do this depends really greatly on the situation, but like a lot of what we do and what came up in my conversations with folks is using data, like using analysis and research like on your systems and your products to justify technical work. And I'll give you an example of that in a second. This can also just mean settling disagreements. Like, I don't know how many of you guys get called in to be like, oh, these two engineers are disagreeing. Like, I'm not pulling rank, but like I'm pulling rank. Just like, we need to move on. Like, we need to move forward. Let's get these people to disagree. I think this is actually a really awful part of the job because like everyone knows what's happening and feels icky about it. You do, your director does, the other people who are getting like settled by you feels bad about it. And I don't like doing it and I try and avoid it as much as possible.
You did say that you have 2 sons.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can't wait. Yeah.
Young still, but yeah.
Yeah. But I will say that like this doesn't mean that you don't get to do whatever you want. I think that that's kind of what some people expect. Is like you become staff and you can do whatever you want. You can do whatever you want, but it better be very aligned with what the company is. And being promoted to staff is really a strong signal that the company trusts your technical judgment to align with the company. And if those things fall out of line, trouble awaits you very quickly. So another behavior that I think is really important is kind of this process of disambiguating and then delegating work. So I think that a good staff engineer is always looking to downgrade the level of complexity and ambiguity that they're working on so that like there's always an exit for whatever comes onto your plate. So anytime I'm given a new problem, I really think about like, what's it going to look like to be done with this thing? Like, am I going to be the one like fully landing the project, or is there like a senior or even a whole team I have in mind that I can hone the work and hand it off to in a nice package? And this can mean, doing the proof of concept phase, reading papers, again, like talking, like trying new technologies, doing, sometimes it's talking with other people in the industry to disambiguate a problem. And basically coming up with a validated solution. And one example of this, to kind of touch on what I was saying earlier, is that this is an actual query from our data warehouse that I used for this kind of work, which is that the legal department came to me and said, okay, there are 2,000 pages in the GitHub application. Which ones should we spend which ones should we manually audit for accessibility, which is like the highest expense thing. Like I think we were spending like low double-digit millions of dollars on accessibility audits at one point per year. So they basically said, okay, GitHub is massive. How the heck do we run our program to have the most impact? So I did this work, which was basically querying all of our request records for a week, and it ranked all the views that people touched by the number of unique users per controller action that rendered HTML. That's what all those filters mean. And what this surfaced was that really there's about 100 pages or routes that like the average user hits in a given week. And that allowed us to go from 2,000 pages to 100. And this became like the fundamental structure of the program that we're actually still using, which is this like 2-tier. It's like, does the work fall into this like top 20th of the routes, or does it fall into the bottom, 19 out of 20? In another case, to use a case study from a colleague, my colleague John was asked with finding a replacement for styled components, which is anyone here use styled components? It's like a way of writing CSS and JavaScript that everyone thought was a good idea, but it turned out to be a performance nightmare, especially with server-side rendering. So this was used thousands of places, and my colleague John was told, we have to rip it out, come up with a new replacement, and we have to do that all safely in a space that is very unsafe. Like there's really bad like CI and whatnot around this kind of stuff. And he went and talked to people in the industry. He tried out some new technologies. We found out that CSS layers was actually going to enable us to do this a lot more safely because you could layers. So for those of you who don't know, CSS layers allow you to define to load CSS in a different order than it is applied. So it used to be that you had to load like file A, B, C, and D, and that was the cascade. Now you can load A, B, C, and D, but have D come at the top. And that's a really important thing because of the way that we like load CSS on our site. It was really hamstringing us. And that technology had just become mature enough to use across all of our supported browsers. And that enabled him to do this project. He, of course, then led a team of a half dozen engineers. Actually, I think it was more like a dozen, migrating our whole design system and the entire website to that. And I don't think there was like maybe 10 regressions over like thousands of changes. Like it was incredible. But more generally, this can be being the person in meetings who pushes for clear definitions of problems, propose solutions, defining success criteria. I think that one of the staff engineers I model my work off is he used to say that he tried like for a year to just go into every meeting and just ask the question, what is the problem? That's all he did for a year, and he got like massive recognition for this because like no one was actually asking what the problem was like enough. On a similar note, I think that like we expect staff engineers to be that kind of driving force. We use the term generate energy. This is actually one of our like leadership principles. And I think this is really important as you get to higher levels, because when you have this like larger scope, whether it's breadth or depth, it's very difficult to succeed if you can't actually inspire other people to be interested and care about what you care about. Like it's a very human kind of thing. So for example, when I was doing that big view component migration, a lot of what I was doing wasn't writing code. It was, pairing with people. It was doing office hours and writing up and talking about our work, which not everyone likes to do. Another big part of that is that you need to build up others around you. So, as staff is a terminal role, there's like less of an expectation that you're going to get promoted, which means that you're expected to not hoard opportunities to look good. In fact, at least I've had a lot of managers that have said that they would rather me give a good project to someone else and talk about how I helped them than to put my name on anything. Like even to put my name on a PR, for example, it's better to put a more junior engineer's name on the PR because it's more valuable for them from a growth opportunity. In fact, I think that's like a big thing is that like at least I've been expected to work on helping other people get promoted, that my interest in promotion should fall very far down my list of priorities. One common thing that we do internally is that like a lot of staff engineers will help seniors write their company blog posts, for example, to help them have the confidence of saying something technical to all of you. And I think lastly, and this is what everyone thinks is true about staff engineers, is that they're just expected to get shit done. Like we talk about it as deliver success, but it's like you're expected to be really consistent and reliable when it comes to doing important work. And whether something has to ship on time, or like you're helping install a critical project, or you have like a new problem come in that we've never seen before, we rely on our staff engineers to just solve the trickiest problems, and we can just lean on them to do it. And this pressure is not for everyone. I've only had a couple of these projects in my time at staff, but they've all been a thrill and have definitely kept me on my toes. And for my colleague John, for example, like this is one John and I worked on together for a while. We shipped dark mode. They were like, let's make GitHub do dark mode. And 3 years later, we shipped dark mode. Because it turned out that like none of GitHub wanted to be dark mode. And it turned out that it actually turned out, I think I talked about this at one point, that it was an accessibility thing. We actually need to support color blindness. And to support color blindness, we need to support theming. And once we have theming, we have dark mode. But that was one that we worked on. It was years in the making, and we had all these like fail safes and whatnot. I hope none of you all noticed too many bugs. And a related one that we also worked on was making all of GitHub responsive, just like every page, 2,000 pages responsive with very few bugs. Like that's a similar kind of just like get it done, just get it done. And for a lot of people, that's the most confident path to staff. It's to just do good work, do big, impactful things. Like at some point, like if you do this kind of work and your company has a staff position, they're going to almost force you to take it, because you're going to start to embarrass the other people with the senior title, because they're going to be like, wait, that's not what I'm doing. Like that's way beyond. Like we need to give this person another role. And a metaphor I like for this is that we see when we're under pressure is one I think a lot of us can relate to here is Coloradans, which is that when you're thinking about the difficulty of skiing, it often depends on the weather. So like I'm a blue skier, but if there's a great powder day, I can ski the blacks because I'll just bounce all the way up. But if it's super icy, like the blues can get sketchy, at least the ones I ski at Keystone. Software projects, I think, take a very similar mode where like under normal conditions, you're kind of expected to operate at your level. But when you're under higher pressure, like a staff engineer might be given a senior project, but be expected to ship it in half the time and like get like on time, like no compromises. The opposite can also be true. It might be like, oh, there's low pressure, take this thing that's a bit of a stretch, right? Anyways, Rylan, you're giving me the body language cues that I'm running out of time, and thankfully I'm done. I hope that someone I've shared today is useful to you guys, and no matter your level, though most of you guys are staff engineers. I think this job isn't for everyone. It doesn't need to be. I think it's fine to stay at senior and move into management. It's fine to move back to senior, Tim. I think you should consider a path towards it, though, if you haven't. I think it's really cool. I don't like managing people. Yeah, I think it might be for you if you haven't thought about it. Thanks. These are my peer reviewers. Yeah.
Questions? So thorough and intimidating that we're like good.
I mean, I've got a list.
Oh,
Okay.
Ken's got one, and then
You wanna go, Tim?
Well, I mean, this relates to how the job is different for everybody. Even at my own company, it's different. Like different teams, some people code a lot, some don't code at all. Like it's the role is different everywhere. But like the way you talk, like in my head, I'm like, man, this guy has lots of time doing everything he wants. Like we're like mine is. I feel like I do like 12 things every single day. Like I get new ones every day. I feel like that's what my life is, and it's almost like time management. The most important thing in the world that you could do is every half hour, what the hell am I doing?
Yeah.
And I'm watching, I'm like, this sounds like a fantasy. This sounds nice.
You don't think
not working on stuff? I know it's not true. I know it's not true. That's what I'm saying. Or is it true?
I don't know. What's your question?
You just get to hang out and, no, I don't know.
I mean,
I don't know. I don't know what my question is. Yeah, I guess it's just, I think my biggest issue with my role and my position and my job, like I have no time to think. It's just like, do all these 18 things.
You sound like a principal engineer at our company.
Yeah.
I think that's the difference between principal and staff, at least it has been my impression, is that the principal engineers are doing staff level work, but like but it's compressed, kind of like what I was talking about with the skiing, right? Like they're expected to do the staff level work, but in half the time. Does that make sense? Or more of it.
I guess that's one question.
But we don't, I didn't get the impression that you don't do much. It sounds like a
No.
lot. And intense, deep thinking.
I'm saying it feels like you have space to do things, where I feel like I have no space to do things.
I mean,
But that's an environmental concern.
Yes,
but
correct.
I would say that all, like, I used to, before I had kids especially, just work a lot. And I felt like my life was like that. I always felt like I was like out of breath, even when I was like working. I'd be
Yeah.
like physically, like my breath would feel short, like it was an anxiety thing. I just don't have I just can't give more than the window I have childcare. So I've had to make critical changes. Like I used to, so for example, I used to take every meeting.
Mhm.
Oh,
Now I'm in like 3 or 4 meetings a week
Mhm.
because I found that like I just couldn't, it didn't add up. Now I had to talk to my manager and be like, okay, I just like don't need to go to this, right?
Mhm.
Okay. We'll tell you when you need to come. And I think that like that's like the way we talk about it at GitHub that I think is really crystal clear is activity versus impact. And like I know people that are mid-level engineers that work 60 hours a week that have way worse impact than mid-level engineers that work 30 hours a week
Mhm.
because they're working on the wrong things. But I see that across the levels, and I'm not saying you do that.
No, these are great points to bring up, yeah. Yeah. Again, you can get too wrapped up in all the stuff, and in reality is take a step back and.
Right. The other thing I'd also say is that like something I've observed at all levels is that like if you are like say a new staff engineer or like new to your level, it's actually like the worst place to be because like you're gonna feel like you need to prove yourself because like the worst thing to be is like is a lower performing senior. This is why I don't want to get promoted because I would rather be a really good staff engineer than like a barely principal engineer because the pressure is so much higher.
Chris has a question and then we'll turn to you, Marty, just in case there's a
go
lot.
for it, Chris.
Chris,
Yeah, I don't know, can you hear me or no?
yeah,
Okay, hey, so Joel, awesome presentation. So I want to echo the first thing, like I track everything too. If anybody wants a free program, Obsidian on OS X is great for this, but the tracking thing you mentioned is incredible. Like that's, everybody should be doing that. The question that I have is what, in your role, this is a two-part question. What is your percentage of hands-on keys coding versus not? And then what do you perceive like in the marketplace, what that percentage might be? So like Tim, one of the things I've seen in the marketplace is you get the promotion, but you're getting 2 to 3x the workload for a little bit of extra pay, but you're really not getting that much extra pay to justify the time increase. So it doesn't actually make fiscal incentive to actually do the staff role because it's 3 times the work for hardly any money.
So
If
you
that
asked
makes sense.
code.
what percentage of your workload is code versus not?
Hands-on.
His first question, hands-on keys.
I've been 0 and I've been 100% just as in a month. I don't know if that's a helpful answer, but like my last critical project was 0 because I was brought in to tech lead manage a team and to get a project out on time, and there was no code that was useful for me to write. But like right now, I'm working on the herb parser. For those of you who are familiar with the Herb project, working on herb stuff.
Yeah,
and I'm 100% code.
And the second, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the second question is what do you feel like your expectations, what the expectations should be in the market for this role?
So I'll maybe give you a meta answer, Chris, which is that like the way I think about any sort of like job expectation setting is role modeling. Like I have this conversation with my manager all the time even when you talk about the archetypes, like, yeah, there's like those titles like tech lead, etc. But we often joke like, which engineer do you want me to be? Like on this project, do you want me to be like, and we have like principal engineers at the company that are like notorious for doing certain styles of work. And they'll be like, oh, we need you to be a Blake right now. And I'm like, cool, I know what Blake does. I can role model him. I know what his life looks like. I know how happy he is. And that's actually part of that's something like I look for, and is the reason why I don't want to be a principal, is that like I have yet to find a principal role model at GitHub that I want to model. Specifically as a parent of young kids. Like maybe a few years down the line, there's some people who bust their butts and they do incredible work and they're rewarded for it. I think that's great. And I think that's kind of applies at any level, like, or even like when you're like looking to work at a company, it's like, I would sure hope that like you can imagine doing the job of one of the people you're interviewing with, like having the exact day, week, month that like your a hiring teammate has. Because if you can't imagine that being sustainable for you, it kind of doesn't matter what the title is. It doesn't matter what the compensation is in my mind. Does that answer your question, Chris?
He's nodding.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
That's also, but like, I know, like, when I've interviewed at certain jobs for certain staff roles or beyond, and like, you kind of dig into the work and you're like, wait, this is just like a super senior role. Like, I don't want this, like, this isn't what I want, right? So you kind of dig into and see,
Right,
like,
that could be that is a version of staff, it's just
Yeah.
super senior, I know plenty of people that are just like, they were like effectively forced to file a promo packet because they're like I was saying earlier, like, you're just like an incredibly good senior. That's why the archetypes are important, because like, you might aspire to be a solver, but like, your team needs, the only business need anywhere is an architect. And if you don't want to be an architect, you want to be a solver, like, maybe you should stay, you could be a senior solver and it'll be fine.
Yeah, it's all great. It's really good. The first thing I would say that I would probably add is every company's different, and you definitely want to find out how your company promotes and what they incentivize. They might say they promote on these things, but they might not, they might incentivize differently. And so like GitHub is way more advanced. And when I was at Fastly, we were developing the staff level, and we were, creating materials of how you evaluate someone to be a staff engineer and get that promotion. But not all places are that mature, and they'll use the title and they don't know what they're doing. So I think it's very important that wherever you are, find out, and like what you said, like, ask your manager about what they value and find out what the impact of that is, because it changes everywhere. But they're probably the one who's going to drive that the most, and their boss. And so hopefully if they don't suck or whatever, they'll guide you well. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think that like something we do internally, I don't know if this is common, but you can ask to see any promotion packet.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So you can be like, okay, cool, that person just got promoted. They seem happy. What was their promo packet?
That's interesting.
They aren't like shared, but like, they're generally.
Yeah, and leadership a good place is they'll do calibration, where you have managers or directors pitching why so-and-so is ready for this, and like, what's their portfolio look like? Did that really demonstrate that match? And again, it depends on the maturity level of how they promote, but asking your manager, like, what that looks like, and like, assess my work right now. How close am I? Where do you see the gaps? Please, be thorough, because sometimes they might try to be too nice and not give you the feedback, which is like the worst ever. So I think it's good to ask, because you never know.
Right, and your skip level relationship can also be a good place for that too.
Yeah. Yes.
Because generally, if you're getting promoted to staff, especially, it's a skip level thing.
Does
And
everybody know what skip level means?
it's the manager.
Your boss is
Boss. And
Not
they're gonna be the one
single you out.
approving it. They're gonna be the one, they're gonna have to make the case. Like, I think that at GitHub, I think the CTO still approves staff and above promotions.
Yeah.
So like, this question came up, when I gave this talk this morning at work, and the way I said it is that like, your packet can't be the first time that person hears your name.
Oh yeah.
They need to like see your name attached to like a good demo, or like a company blog post or something like that. And at least that's what I've heard.
I believe it.
Yeah.
And I've seen plenty of like, sounds like they're close. Let's talk about them a year from now. The other thing that I think is really good to recognize, and you touched on this, is that it's very much about the opportunities of doing impactful work. And sometimes you might get the opportunity to work on a project that's doomed. And you can't say that thing, like, seriously, like get the hell off that, because that happens. And companies, some leader will say, we're doing this, and it's like, this is not going to work. And your name is attached to that thing, and if it doesn't go well, that's not helping your promotion. So I think that can exist. So just be aware of that. And I think the other thing is it's good to get feedback on how you want to contribute. The understanding impact and what the business values is critical, but don't feel you have to do whatever they want. Because if they're like, we really need someone to do X, and you're like, God, it sucks. Well, then don't suggest or don't volunteer to do it. Now that might take away from opportunity, but something you should think about.
I think that is like something that you touch on something there.
Yeah,
underlying what you just said is that there's actually a real implied change in power dynamic.